I want to talk about the garden's most familiar visitor. You know, the one that always shows up every spring, buzzing from flower to flower, and then flies away. You probably don't even notice it much. Maybe when you see it, you just say, "That bee." But when you stepped out into your garden this morning, I'm sure you noticed something. Silence. The lavender branches are rustling. The sun is shining as usual, but there's no buzzing. So what does that mean? No bees, just the wind. And along with it, the flowers, just swaying back and forth in that useless breeze. Do you think this is a coincidence, or do you think something has changed? The real question here is, if this silence were truly permanent, if the silence I'm talking about were to exist in this garden, in this city, and especially on our planet, what would change? Of course, as you sit down to enjoy your dinner tonight, any worker bee outside will be carrying pollen weighing nearly half her body weight, and another one, especially as she returns to the hive, will be flapping her wings exactly 40 times per second to regulate her body temperature. As for the queen bee, right at this very moment, she'll be laying nearly 2,000 eggs a day, non-stop. And just think, while you're sitting there, this entire system I'm describing will keep running without a single pause. The critical question is, what if this systematic structure were to suddenly come to a halt? Welcome back to the Erhan Oz channel. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, now is the perfect time. Because on this channel, you'll see the world of money not just through a simple, ordinary lens, but through a more genuine, even deeper, scientific perspective. Be sure to stay until the very end, because the topic we'll be discussing today in particular is what the disappearance of bees could do to the human food chain. And perhaps this scenario is much closer to the future than we last imagined. Without further ado, let's dive right into the first point. 1. The collapse of pollination will definitely occur before the collapse of the food system. I'd like to start with this fact. When bees land on flowers, they're always doing a job. They carry the pollen produced by the male organ to the female organ. What I'm describing might seem like a simple task from the outside. I mean, I'm talking about an insect, a flower, and a single contact, right? But without this contact, what we call a seed doesn't form, meaning no fruit is produced. Consequently, the plant's lineage cannot continue. Of course, approximately 67% of the plants cultivated worldwide for human consumption are absolutely and entirely dependent on animals for pollination, and a very high percentage of these animals are bees. However, when we say bees, generally only a single species comes to mind. Yet there are over 20,000 species in the world, and believe me, each one works with a different flower and in a very different way. For example, the honeybee working in apple orchards is, I'd say, the most well-known and familiar face of this. But don't forget that there's one thing the honeybee can't do: vibrational pollination. That is, wild bees. The bumblebees we know, those large yellow and black ones, land on a flower and immediately activate their flight muscles without spreading their wings. In other words, they vibrate in place, and this vibration is produced at a specific frequency. Naturally, this causes the pollen inside the flower to be instantly dislodged. Thus, peppers, eggplants, and even tomatoes. These vegetables can only be pollinated through this method I've described. And the effect on the tomatoes in your garden essentially boils down to this. You must constantly wait for a bee that vibrates at the correct frequency. If that vibration doesn't occur, the flower has bloomed in vain. It glows yellow, looks beautiful, but as I said, no activity begins inside. For humanity, this means, in a garden without bees, flowers may bloom, but bearing fruit is impossible. In other words, there is only the appearance. The harvest remains a fantasy. 2. Wild vegetation tends to decline gradually but irreversibly. Now let's set cultivated plants aside. The real silent revolution takes place mostly in natural areas, that is, the shrubs beneath the forests, along with wildflowers and, the grasses along the edges of swamps. All of these are fundamentally dependent on bees. The subtle difference here is that, of course, the farmer tends to the field crops, waters them, and keeps an eye on them. But no one tends to the wild plants. The only thing that truly sustains them is the natural pollination cycle. Of course, when this cycle is disrupted, no one actually notices, because no one looks under that forest and thinks, "There were more flowers here last year," and tries to make such an observation. Additionally, blueberries cannot produce a bountiful crop without multiple bee species. Clover absolutely cannot set seed without bees. And if the clover doesn't set seed, the pasture that sheep and cows graze on, well, it can't regenerate itself. So this chain I'm talking about actually extends from nature to the farm, and from the farm to your table. But the breaking point here begins in an invisible place, at the edge of a forest. Ultimately, because the chain reaction develops slowly, it's not easy to notice. The first year, the fruit might seem to decrease a bit, and you might say, "Last year wasn't bountiful." In the following second year, the shrubs begin to thin out gradually, and you might think, "There was a drought." But when it comes to the harsh reality, by the fifth year, the birds begin to disappear, because the fruits they feed on are no longer there. By the 10th year, the soil suddenly gives way, and you see that it has eroded. So all the stages I've mentioned build upon one another, and unfortunately, you're forced to witness these stages one by one. Finally, when you look back, you realize that the entire understory of the forest has changed. You'll be amazed at how this happened so quietly, without you even noticing. 3. Animal feed faces a crisis, and meat and milk are forced to be sold at high prices. We've reached one of the most important and valuable points. Here we're taking it a step further. Bees pollinate not only fruits and vegetables, but also animal feed. In fact, legumes like alfalfa and clover are the primary protein source for farm animals. These plants cannot set seed without bees. If they cannot set seed, the field does not regenerate, the pasture dries up, and there is no feed left to put before the animals. Right now, the milk a cow produces, a sheep growing into meat. This chain relies on a single bee working in that field. To see this connection, you need to look not at a factory, but at the edge of a pasture. Looking at the issue from another angle, researchers have long documented that the severe decline in honeybee populations directly affects the productivity of agricultural land. And this effect isn't a domino, it's a multiplier. Dominoes fall one after another. A multiplier grows in every direction at the same time. When feed decreases, animals weaken. When they weaken, milk production drops. When milk drops, cheese, yogurt, and butter become scarce. Meat production declines, and prices rise. This directly impacts your table, both your wallet and your plate. Never forget this. In a world without bees, supermarket shelves won't be completely empty. But abundance is one thing. Accessibility is another. There may be shelves, but no prices. There may be products, but no money left to buy them. Scarcity sometimes comes not from lack, but from inability to access. 4. Biodiversity must undergo transformation within a single generation. Yes, now we're expanding the scale. Bees don't just pollinate plants, they maintain the balance of ecosystems. As many of us might guess, the vast majority of birds feed on insects and fruit. If those fruits depend on bees, then bird species depend on bees too. But the chain doesn't end there. A lizard carries wildflower seeds, but those flowers must first be pollinated by bees. A fox eats fruit, and that fruit depends on bees. A fish eats insects, and those insects depend on coastal plants, which in turn depend on bees. Whenever you think of a bird, a lizard, or a fish, the same name always comes up in the background: the bee. Additionally, scientists call this a trophic cascade, or the collapse of the food chain. Let's understand it this way. If a single node breaks in a network, the network doesn't collapse immediately. But the load that node carried is distributed to the others, tension increases, and other nodes weaken. It's silent, invisible, but inevitable. Even species with no direct connection to bees will eventually feel this strain, because there is no such thing as distant in an ecosystem. Everything is connected to everything else. Ultimately, within a single generation, 30 to 40 years, the map of biodiversity could become unrecognizable. This is not a prophecy. It is already partially observable in regions where bee populations are declining. Some bird species are decreasing. Certain wildflowers are disappearing from those areas, and some pastures are becoming sparser. It is not the full picture yet, but the edges of the picture are beginning to take shape. 5. Human civilization is not even aware that it stands on a foundation far more fragile than it imagines. I saved this section for last, specifically because the broader picture lies here. Here's the reality. According to data from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, a significant portion of the calories consumed by humanity comes from plants that depend on pollination. But don't think of this as a list. Think of it as a subtraction. The cacao tree relies on small insects for pollination. Chocolate is gone. Almonds are among the crops requiring the most intensively managed bee colonies in the world. Almonds are gone. The coffee plant yields much more fruit with bee pollination. Coffee becomes scarce, prices rise, and it becomes inaccessible. Apples, cherries, watermelons, cantaloupes, strawberries. Subtract those too. What remains? Grains, potatoes, rice. We survive. But this is not civilization. It is mere survival. In essence, cultures, flavors, cuisines, economies, all have built their current forms on the backs of bees. The tomato sauce on an Italian plate, the honey at a Turkish breakfast, the apple in a child's hand. These seem ordinary, but each one depends on a bee landing on a flower. As a result of this situation, the ground beneath it is now visibly shaking. In the phenomenon known as colony collapse disorder, colonies mysteriously empty out. The worker bees disappear. The queen remains behind. The hive doesn't die, but becomes dysfunctional. Researchers noticed this decades ago, and there is still no definitive answer. Pesticide exposure, habitat loss, parasites, climate change. These factors aren't acting separately, but together and simultaneously. If there were just one enemy, a solution could be found. But this is system-wide pressure, and that system runs through the bees. After discussing these 5 points, I can summarize briefly. When you stood in the garden this morning, waiting for that buzzing sound, what crossed your mind? Maybe you thought, they're a bit late this year. Maybe you didn't even notice this situation at all, but I'm certain that after watching this video, you now know. That buzzing sound I mentioned wasn't just the sound of a single bee. It was, in fact, the very pulse of a whole ecosystem. That single bee, while circling with a load nearly half its body weight, was simultaneously opening the doors to thousands of fruits for us. And together with the tens of thousands in the hive, it wasn't just an organization, it was building a mechanism. And right now, out there, Even in the darkness of this night, there's an incredibly intense effort underway. The flowers are ready for tomorrow. The bees are eagerly awaiting dawn. You've been living alongside this for years, and by now you know these facts I'm talking about very well. Have you noticed any changes in the number of bees in your garden or surroundings this spring compared to previous years? Please be sure to share your observations in the comments. I'm curious. See you in the next video.